Um, so before we begin our session, I just wanted to highlight the whole series we're going to be doing. As I said, this is a community science workshop series beginning today with the Learn to Bird presentation. Then we'll have presentations on precipitation, iNaturalist, phenology, and invasive species as we go throughout the season, once each month until May. If you want more information about those workshops, or you want to sign up, you can go to our website, llnf.org, for the complete information. So today we're going to be learning all about how to use eBird. Before we talk about eBird, I want to talk generally about what community science is, this being the first session. So community science is basically, in a nutshell, an opportunity for all people, regardless of age, experience, or education, to be involved in collection of data. It can be any type of data collection, any type of science. And basically the only requirement for being able to participate is that you're a member of the Homo sapien species. Nothing else, just being a human is all you need to do to participate. So what is eBird? eBird is one of these platforms. It's talked about as being one of the oldest and most successful platforms. It's definitely at least one of the oldest in the modern age, in the digital age. It started in 2002. So there's over 19 years of data so far. Data is submitted and recorded worldwide. This says there's over 650,000 unique eBirders, but I actually checked today and there's actually 730,000 at this point. And so far, more than 1 billion bird observations have been reported. Actually, 100 million observations are reported every single year for the last 5 years. And more than 300 publications based on eBird data have been authored. So basically what it is, it's a platform and it exists in a mobile platform and it exists on an online version as well. And the whole point of this platform is to inform people about where are good places to bird, give them resources to bird, and provide them support to submit their observations on what birds they saw. So just quickly, how is this already being used on Nantucket and at Linda Loring? So for those of you who know the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, may have been involved, we do weekly birding field trips every Wednesday in the summer. And we take all the data from those trips and we report it to eBird. The Linda Loring Nature Foundation property itself is also what's called an eBird hotspot. That is an area that's been designated by the eBird community as being a good place to bird. It's not, the hotspots aren't the only places that are going to be productive birding locations, but it's a good place to bird. Let's say if you don't know about Nantucket, it's a good place to start. And just for reference, in 2021, this past year, there was 97 eBirders on Nantucket itself who were using eBird as a platform. So how can you be involved? It's super simple. You only need to do 3 things. And later in this presentation, what we're going to do in this presentation is we're going to go through a few more slides about the basics and background of eBird. Then we're going to go over to the eBird website itself, and we're going to go through how you actually use it. And we're going to try to look at the mobile app later if the technology cooperates. And if not, we'll demonstrate that in the field trip. So you need to do 3 things. The first is sign up for a free account. You basically just put in your name, a username, and an email, and you get an account created. The second thing is go birding. And you don't need to have any experience or any skill or any equipment even. You could just sit at your kitchen table, look out the window, and record the birds there. You could be in your backyard recording birds there. or you could use it in a more professional sense if you have binoculars or a scope or access to field guides or access to people in your community who could help you observe and learn about birds. Then you could use it as a tool for the birding trips that you take. And you can submit these observations again anywhere in the world, anytime. So that's it. You just need to go birding, and then you need to submit a checklist, it's called, of the birds you saw via the mobile app or online. And later in this presentation, we're going to go through how you actually submit a checklist. So what is the benefit of using eBird? So eBird, I like to say, is hyper local. So when you go birding and you use eBird, it requires you to select a GPS location in which you birded at. So rather than just telling your friends or writing up a report in a newspaper that said, I birded on Nantucket, you're going to actually have to pick a location. I birded specifically at, let's say, the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, or I birded at this specific beach in Costa Rica. You're going to have to pick that location. And when you submit the checklist, there's going to be a link to Google Maps that shows people where that location is. So that's good for people planning birding trips. And we're going to talk about how you can use eBird as a planning tool a little bit more as well. All the data that's ever been submitted is free to access and analyze for everybody, not just for university researchers or the academic community. And when I say analyze, you could do like scientific data analysis with it, or you could just use it in kind of the general sense, analyze the recent observations to see what birds might be being submitted in a location that you're interested in birding at, and to give you a look at what birds are a possibility that you might see in any given time of the year. And there's features on eBird that really help you out with that. So from the user experience side, eBird is really broken down into two different halves. Half of it is all about submitting the data and providing you the resources to submit. And the other half is about providing you resources to be able to explore the data. And we're gonna later in this presentation walk through the website extensively about how to explore the data. So it'll make a little bit more sense then. And if you remember back to a few slides ago about how you can be involved, when you sign up for that Cornell Lab account, that's who runs eBird. You also get access for free to all of their other programs. They have many great birding applications and birding programs, a lot of them which are directed at beginners. So just a little bit more specifically, here's some benefits, both for the public, the people using the platform, and for the researchers. So the public, I said it before, but you have near real-time sighting updates. So before eBird, if you wanted to know what birds to see in a specific area, you could maybe join a group of naturalists and talk to them and try to get some local knowledge. You could buy a field guide to the area and read a book and see what was expected in that region. But books aren't malleable and they can't be updated. Or you could just go and explore and see what you saw. But with eBird, when you submit a checklist, it gets uploaded and then it goes live to the public 1 hour later. So if I go out birding and I see 25 species, an hour later after I submitted that checklist, you can log on to eBird. You can see the location I birded at. You can see the species I saw and the number of individuals of each of those species. And you could go to that same place if you wanted to see a specific species. Let's say you wanted to see this Baltimore Oriole pictured here, and I saw it an hour ago. You could log on to eBird, see where I saw it, and then go chase after it and try to find it yourself. And then there's also another way to explore data called an illustrated checklist. I'll go through that in the website walkthrough, but it basically shows you not actually what's been seen on any given day, but what's expected to be seen in the specific area during a specific season. So that's how the public can benefit. And then researchers also benefit. So community science is essentially this partnership between academic researchers and members of the public. And in any successful partnership, there has to be benefits to both sides. So I think the benefits for the public for eBird are vast. I think personally they even outweigh the benefits for researchers, but researchers do benefit as well. What researchers are getting by using this platform or by having this platform available is a global network of bird observations that people are collecting for free. So for those of us in the research world who have worked in research labs or have been a field assistant or hired field assistants, no lab ever in the world will ever be able to hire the amount of field assistants that would be required to make a sample size and a data set as big as eBird. But what they're doing is essentially outsourcing the data to just interested members of the public, birders. They're getting all that data for free. And you're getting this large, robust sample size. As I said, over 100 million sightings of birds per year. And you can look at birds then and see across the whole year, across their whole range. So not only in one location, you can look at their migratory locations, their wintering grounds, their breeding grounds, and you can see exactly what those birds were doing in any year. And then you can take that data, you can run statistical analyses on it, and then you can publish it in a peer-reviewed journals. So I think I said this before, but it's really a digital tool for a digital age. Before eBird came out, it's not the first resource that birders had access to, but it's definitely one of the first digital resources. Before eBird came out, everything was the paper naturalist age. It was the age of books, the age of checklists, and the age of field guides. And there's nothing wrong with those resources. I think field guides and checklists are incredibly important resources to have available. But the issue with them, the issue with any print material, is it gets printed and it becomes difficult to update. It's not a malleable resource, especially with something like a book that you need to get run through a publishing house. It takes quite a while to update the book and then get it republished. So for instance, here I have a picture of the Sibley's Guide to the Birds, the second edition. The second edition came out, I think, multiple decades after the first edition. And by the time it came out, all the information in it, or not all, but a lot of information in it had changed drastically. Some of the names of birds had changed. A lot of the ranges of birds have changed. A lot of the descriptions had changed. So you have a really strong, well-researched guide, but it's not really malleable. Again, this picture here is a checklist. It's basically just a printed out list of birds that you might see in any specific location. This is the checklist for Nantucket birds. And it might be hard to see in this photo, but there's 4 columns: spring, summer, fall, and winter. And there's a rating system. It says VC is very common, C is common, U is uncommon, and R is rare. It basically goes through all the birds in Nantucket, and it tells you in each season what your general probability of seeing that bird is. But with eBird, with all these checklists being reported and uploaded in near real time, this information changes daily. So the most accurate, most up-to-date information is always going to be in that website or on that app. And when you see a new bird in an area that's never been seen before, that information becomes available immediately. You don't have to wait years or decades for it to get into a book. So with that, I think we're going to go straight to the website, and we're going to talk about, again, how you submit data with eBird, and we're going to talk about how you explore data with eBird. All right, so this is what eBird looks like. This is actually Nantucket eBird, so I'm going to back out to the overall eBird. So eBird, again, is run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and you have at the top all these tabs. The two I think are most important that we're going to be spending our time on today is submit and explore. Then if you make an account, you'll have an account under My eBird that has kind of stats about all the birding you've done throughout your career as an eBirder. And then the science tool is how the data analysis and the academic part of it comes into play. But for members of the public, really, it's these first three tabs that are going to be the most important. And one of the best parts about eBird is every single day, there's a new bird photo here on the main page from somewhere, anywhere around the world. And there, you get some kind of like thumbnail information, you get your stats here, you get recent news, you get like overall eBird stats. So on eBird, over 10,000 species have been recorded. That's almost all of the species of birds anywhere in the world. You can see the checklist and the amount of eBirders. You can see which locations have the most species worldwide. You can see which locations have the most checklists, and then there's ability to explore. So we're gonna get back to exploring in a second, but the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna see how it looks like to submit on the web. So let's take a theoretical example, and let's say I went on a trip to New York City, and I wanted to submit a checklist at Central Park. I can do that on my phone with the mobile app. We'll demonstrate that later. Or I can record a list and submit it online here in my account. So when you go to submit to eBird, the first question is, where did you bird? And you have options. If it's a place that you've been to before, you can choose from your locations. But these are all the places I've ever recorded a checklist at. Some of the places I record checklists at quite frequently, sort of just there. You can find it on a map. So I could say New York City, or maybe New York, New York. And then a map will come up, and you can see these are all the places that possibly could be hotspots in New York. I can search like Central Park, and it will take me to all the places in Central Park that I could have been at. Just like it's a little bit easier on Nantucket because there's less hotspots, so I'll show it like that. Well, if we go to Nantucket, you can, we'll scroll down here. You can see all of these locations in red are the hotspots. Those are the places that the eBird community is designated as being good places to bird. You can turn satellite view on. You could back this out to full screen if you want. You can zoom in. And then that's all the red all the red dots with the flame logo. All the blue dots are other places that people on Nantucket have submitted checklists as well. So if we kind of zoom in to here at the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, and we click this checklist icon. Why is it not clicking? If we click this checklist icon, it'll say chosen location, Linda Loring Nature Foundation. Let's pretend we're birding there, and then we'd hit continue. Then it's going to ask you some questions about your date and effort. It's going to basically say, what was the date? So we would go January 20th. And then it's going to give you this drop down of what your observation type was. Traveling is essentially what it says. You walked or traveled on a specific trail, or you went over some amount of distance. Stationary is you stood at a specific place or sat at a specific place and didn't really move. I don't use historical that much, but it's basically if you can't remember exactly what you did, use historical. And then I actually use incidental quite a bit. It's what you pick. If you saw some birds, but you didn't really go out with the intention of birding. So if you were gardening, or you were out hunting, or you're out boating, you're out fishing, you would click incidental. And each of these options has some different information. So if you pick traveling, you see down here, you're going to have to estimate the number of miles you walked or you went. If you pick stationary, it's not going to ask you for that. And if you pick incidental, it's going to ask you for the least amount of information. But we'll just say stationary. We'll say it's 5:50 p.m. Then it's going to ask you how long you birded for. We're just making this up right now, but you would hopefully estimate your actual amount of time. Let's say 45 minutes. Then it's going to ask you how many people you were with, essentially. If you birded alone, 1. If you birded with many, then many. I see there's 20 participants on here. So let's say 20. And then checklist comments, that is optional, but it's where you can add some more information for the eBird community about what you were doing. So I'll say eBird workshop test. I'm not actually going to submit this because it's not real data, but it's just an opportunity to see what we're doing. Then you hit continue. And then here's where you actually put in the birds you saw. So there is a running list of all of the species grouped by taxonomic order. So it's not alphabetical, it's by taxonomy. If you don't really know bird taxonomy, you might have to kind of just read through. If you have a field guide with you, a birding book, it's going to be in the same format as that book. Or if you want to just pick out specific species, you can use this search function up here. So let's say I saw an American robin. I can just start typing in American robin and things will come up for me. I can click it. It will take me automatically to the American robin. If I don't want to search, I can kind of just look through and see what I saw. So it's very easy to actually submit. We go through and we essentially look, did we see any brants? No. Did we see any Canada geese? Let's pretend we saw Canada geese. And then you just have to put in the amount that you saw. Okay, we saw 17. Then it's going to add details. So if you have any special details about this bird, you could add them here. This is where you would put comments, such as one bird had broken wing, something like that. You would put the comments in there. You can also add media. Media is photos and audio, and we're going to look through some media later. And then you can also add information about age and sex. You can add information about the breeding behavior of this bird. A lot of drop downs there. There's a lot more information you can add, but the most basic information is just what birds did you see and how many. So we'll go through, we keep going through this checklist. We essentially go through and we see what we saw. Gadwall, we'll say we saw 1. Keep going through. Ringneck pheasant, let's say we saw 2. Sanderling, 4. Would it be an odd checklist, but you keep going through all the way down to the bottom. And then when you've gone through the checklist and you have filled out all the birds that you saw, then you are going to go over here to submit. But before I do that, I want to let people know one thing, and that these checklists are it's not every single possible bird that exists, but it's a list that the eBird algorithm has determined as being the likely birds to see in that area. So if you see something super rare, like a, let's say, magnificent frigate bird, one of those was seen recently on Nantucket during the Christmas bird count, it's going to say no matches on this checklist because it doesn't think you probably saw that, or it's unexpected that you saw that. But you can just hit add species. You can put that species in, if I spell it right. And you could manually add this to your checklist, but it's going to tell you you need some details. You need a photo or some really good information because it doesn't really think this bird should be in this location at this time of the year. You add those details, and it was going to make you manually click complete before you submit it. So sometimes you are actually going to do this, but mostly you're going to go through the birds that are on the checklist. Then when we're ready to submit, it's going to ask us, are you submitting a complete checklist of the birds you're able to identify? Yes or no. What that means is basically if you're reporting every bird you saw at a location, you hit yes. If you're reporting just some of the birds you saw, you hit no. Once you click that, you'll hit submit. I'm not going to hit submit here because this is fake data, but you would just hit submit and it would become submitted to eBird, and it would then become live within an hour. That's how you submit on eBird. If we have time, I'll also show you on the app. But then we're going to talk about how you explore the data. We'll spend probably maybe 15 minutes on this, and then we will leave some time for a question and answer. So this is my favorite part of eBird because there's so many opportunities to explore. You can explore by species, you can explore by region, you can explore maps. I'm going to show you the regions first. So we're going to look at Nantucket. If we click Nantucket, now we're going to get fine-tuned location-specific information that's only about Nantucket. And if you see up in my toolbar here, I have it bookmarked because I use it so much. So again, eBird is this large global network of bird observations, but you can refine it and you can distill the data down to just what you're interested in. So if you want to know about Nantucket, you just search for Nantucket. You can filter this data by either all years, current year, current month. I usually keep it on all years because that will tell you the whole picture of all the data for Nantucket. Gives you basic information up here, how many species are on island, 388 submitted to eBird, how many checklists, how many birders ever submitted the checklist, over 1,000, and how many hotspots. And then this is the best part. It tells you by species name, all the recent sightings and exactly what the date was, who the observer was, and where the location was. And you can kind of look through and say, oh, common goldeneye. I love that bird, but I've never seen one in person. I want to see that. So common goldeneye, you look, okay, 4 were submitted on January 19th. That's yesterday by this observer, Toby Sackton. at Nantucket Jackson Point. If you want to see everything that was submitted on that checklist, you can click this. I'm just going to open it up in a new tab. And it will say, okay, here are all the species submitted as part of that checklist. The other thing you can do is you can learn more about who submitted it, kind of like maybe digital spying a little bit, but some people make their profiles public. So if it's blue and clickable, that means their profile is public, and you can learn more about who they are. People have like biographies, and you can see their data and statistics. And then you can also learn more about the place that it was submitted. So you say Nantucket Jackson Point, and you would click Jackson Point. And so here's all the information for Jackson Point. So I saw in the chat, Sarah saying, can you make your checklist private if you want to? You can make your checklist private, especially if there's like sensitive information. You can make it private. You can also make your profile private. So if you don't want people like looking at your information, you can just make your profile private. It's a personal choice. So if we go back to this checklist, Nantucket Jackson Point, great. If you're on island, if you're a birder here, you probably know where that is. But let's say you're planning a trip for a weekend and you're coming from Missouri. But you see Nantucket Jackson Point is a good place to go because there's been a lot of good birds there. You can click on the checklist and you can hit view on Google Maps, and it will show you exact GPS location with a pin and everything. You can, get this to satellite, and it will say that's exactly where Jackson Point is. You can send that to your phone, get driving directions, whatever you need. And then if you want to learn more about Jackson Point specifically, when we're back into here, if you click this Jackson Point tab, you can see, okay, now we're filtering not only by Nantucket, but we're filtering by just a subset of Nantucket, this one location. And here are all the recent sightings at this location. Here are all the recent visits at this location. Here are the top eBirders at that location. And you can kind of, see, okay, 205 species have been observed there. That's probably a nice place to go. The other thing you can do with eBird to kind of like search for where are good places to go. Let's say you're coming to Nantucket, you've never birded here, you don't really know anything about the island, but you heard it was a good place. Let's say you don't want to, go out on a trip, you just want to do your own thing. You click map. Now you're going to get a map of all of the birding locations on Nantucket, and you're going to get this guide here, ranked from red to gray. Essentially redder the dot is, the more species that have been observed. The grayer, the less. So you can go through this map and you can start like clicking places. So you can click, okay, Eel Point, that was yellow, 170 species through the whole year in every year, versus something like this gray one. You can zoom in here to Hooper Farm Duck Factory. There's only 14 species being reported there. And then you can filter this even further. You can filter it by year-round current year. So you can see just what's been seen so far. It's only January, so it's maybe not that helpful. But if it was later in the year, it might be a little bit more helpful. Or you can filter by custom date range. So let's say you want to know just about January, but you want to know every year what's been seen in January. You can set that date range, and then we'll zoom in a little bit. And you can see pretty quickly, there's these 3 yellowish green locations. Those are the highest up on this kind of species richness ranking. Those are probably the 3 best places, or best is relative, but 3 highly likely good places to go birding in January on Nantucket. You can click to see what they are. It's horse farm lookout at Hummock Pond. And then you could view the details of that. Get back into kind of the same page as we looked at for Jackson Point. And you can see the details for Hummock Pond. And then you can go over to these other ones, Sconset, and Low Beach. So that's kind of how you explore the map. And just a couple other ways to use eBird to explore. You can also use what's called the illustrated checklist. So I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but this is like a digital field guide or a digital bar chart, which tells you what are the expected birds that you're going to see in any location at any time. So we have this filtered by Nantucket, but you can change this to any location, whether it's a specific hotspot or a region that's a whole county, a wildlife refuge. You can select this as anything. And you can go through in taxonomic order again, all of the birds that have ever been seen here. You'll see a picture and audio if it's available. You'll see the name of the species, the scientific name, and when it was last seen. And then you have this really nice bar chart. So this chart goes January through December, with the red line being where we are currently. Well, if you click on the red line and you see a frequency of 0, that means there's never been a black-bellied whistling duck reported on eBird on this date. But if you go down to something like snow goose, you can see on 2.1% of all checklists being submitted in this time of the year for eBird have snow geese on them. So if you want to see a snow geese, this is an appropriate time of the year to look for them. And in fact, on island currently, there are several flocks of snow goose. But you might say, okay, 2.1, that's a very small percentage. It's true, it is a small percentage. It's because snow geese tend to be a relatively scarce bird here compared to other birds. But this kind of bar chart will show you all the dates throughout the year when they're expected. So 2.1% might be not a lot, but it's better than looking in July or August where the probability is 0. So if you want to find them, you have to find them kind of in this blue range. So let's look at a common species. Let's look at Canada goose. You can see these blue bars are throughout the entire year, which means that Canada geese can be found on Nantucket year-round. And you can see the red bar where we are now. 26.5% of checklists report Canada geese. You can see these bars kind of get a little bit bigger. So in March and April, you get up to 41%, a little bit even more in kind of April before May. And then it kind of is pretty common, but varying a little bit throughout the year. And if we go back up to the top and we want to see an even more common species, American robin, you can see again throughout the whole year. You can see them now. But if you go to like April, May, throughout the whole summer, you're getting 60, 70% of all checklists reporting them. So that's a good time really to look for robins. I'm just going to share one more way that you can use eBird to explore, and then I'm going to close out of here and take some questions. So the last thing you can do on eBird is if you don't want to explore by region, but you want to explore a specific species, you can explore the species here. I'm going to choose snow goose because we talked about that already. And if you click snow goose, there'll be a ton of information about that bird. There'll be photos, there'll be audio, there'll be a whole identification. There will be your statistics about have you seen it? And then there will be a whole range map. So if you go to here and you look at this range map, all those purple dots are places where snow geese across the world have been seen. The darker purple means seen more often. If you want to see a snow goose, probably don't look in Africa or Asia. North America, maybe a little bit of Europe is where you're trying to look. So you can kind of hone down the specific species you're interested in. Let's say you're not planning a trip to one location to bird, but you're planning a trip based on a specific species. You could search on eBird and you can pick the best place to go look for that based on where it's found. So for instance, a lot of people right now are looking for a stellar sea eagle. Spell this right. All right, so stellar sea eagle, this majestic Eurasian bird that's been spotted a few times in Maine and Massachusetts recently. If you look at the range map, and we're gonna have to zoom in here, but you see very, very, very few sightings in kind of the Atlantic coast of North America. It's possible to see it. There is one around now. But if you want the highest probability to see a stellar sea eagle, you should probably go over here to Russia and Japan, Alaska. It's a better place to see them. So I'm actually going to stop my share, and I'm going to open it up and take questions. I think we're going to table the walkthrough of the app till we go out in the field together on Saturday, just because I want to make sure everyone has time to get their questions in. If you have questions, you can raise your hand. You can type things in the chat. Yes, Sarah.
So I'm embarrassed to say that I'm an eBird newbie. I've never ever used eBird before, and I just downloaded it on my phone. As someone who's used eBird for a long time, what are your recommendations for getting started? Like, I know if we do a field trip together, that's a good way to start. But if we want to go out tomorrow, let's say, do you recommend just kind of going out and taking some notes and then coming back to the desktop to do it? Or would you kind of recommend stumbling through on the app, or just kind of hear your thoughts about starting?
Yeah, maybe I actually will show the app really quick. I think it'll be helpful. I'm gonna just switch on over to here. Hi there. Can you see me on the phone? All right. All right, so this is what the eBird app looks like. It's kind of the same idea. There's submit and then kind of explore down at the bottom, and it'll ask you the same information, the date, kind of just with a more mobile friendly track here, the time, same information as before. And then there's this one difference. This is the record track. Record track is essentially, with your phone being GPS enabled, it's going to basically record where you're walking as you walked. So it won't only have a pin on the map, but it'll also have kind of a track of where you walked, like Strava, if anyone uses that. So same idea, you hit start checklist. Up here, you actually have to submit, you have to select your location, a little bit different, but we'll just go over to here. Again, you can see that hotspot symbol. We'll say Linda Loring Nature Foundation. And then again, going through the species that you see. So Canada goose, if you hit this plus tab, it'll be 1. If you click the button itself, you get more information. You can say 55.
you can enter the details here. Test. And then when you're ready to submit your checklist, you would hit stop your track, and then it will ask you what type of checklist you were doing. Again, traveling, stationary, or incidental. How many observers? Well, again, let's say 20. Let's say we were stationary. You would say how many minutes, and then you don't have to say miles. And then you have the option to share a checklist with other eBirders. I didn't really get into that, but I can discuss that more at some point. You can have your checklist comments here, and then you'll have a list of all your species. If you went to submit, but you didn't, get all the species that you thought, you can just go back and you can start putting new species in. And then you would go and hit submit. I'm not going to submit this because this, again, is not real data. So I'm going to actually go back onto the computer.
All right, sorry that was a little clunky. It's maybe easier to see in the field, but I'm going to show you. I am going to actually share one more thing on my screen because I'm going to show you what the checklist looks like after you submit it. So if you go to My eBird, hopefully this is where all your data that you submitted is. If you go to checklists, here's a list of all your checklists. And if you go to this checklist, this I actually submitted on my mobile device. You can see that because it will say eBird mobile tracks. And it actually recorded everywhere I walked when I submitted on mobile. And yeah, this is kind of like what the checklist looks like. So yeah, if you do come to the program, the optional field trip, we can talk about that more and kind of walk through it. I see Kathy Greeter's comment in the chat. Do you download the app from the App Store? Yes, I will get the download link and I will put it in the chat right now. The account to sign up for eBird is, again, completely free, and you can download on App Store or on Android. I'm going to put the iPhone App Store link here because that's what I have and that's what I use, but you can search for Android as well. Yes, Sarah.
So I have a question about, let's say we all go on a walk together, or maybe just like 4 of us go on a walk together. Do we submit one checklist that is like the 4 of us went for a walk, or like do each of us submit this checklist and say this is a duplicate? As a scientist, I think of duplication of data. But then I also know with these kind of apps, there's a little bit of competition. You want to have like, I saw all these species. So how does that usually work?
Yes, that's a great question and something I failed to mention. So if we go on a walk all together, all of us, what would happen is we would, as a group, decide on one person to record the data and to submit the checklist. So they would record their data on their phone or online, submit that checklist. And then eBird has a really nice function that's called share, where you can share that checklist with other eBirders and they'll get a copy of it. So all the species that were recorded on that trip will show up in their account. A history of that checklist will show up in their account. But on the data analysis, the back end, the scientific side, only like one branch of that shared checklist will be seen. So it won't be showed as duplicate data on the science side. It will just be shown as kind of like a branch of a main checklist. And I'm going to share my screen one more time and show you what that looks like. So if I had done this checklist with other people, I didn't, I was just one person, I could click this button for share, and I can type in anybody's eBird username or email. So let's say that Sarah theoretically made her username stboyce. I could hit that and I could hit share with her. Or if I don't know what her username is, but I think she used her email, I could use her email and share the checklist with her. So the only thing you need from somebody to share a checklist with them is their eBird username or their email. And then once you've shared a checklist with somebody, it'll get stuck in your contacts. These are all the people I've shared checklists with. I can just click their name and it will come up automatically. And then if I go to my eBird and I go to not checklist. Oh, I forget exactly where it is in here, but there's some place where you can see all your shared checklists. So for instance, I'll find one where I shared with multiple people. You'll see this icon that has other people's, the two people's logo or icon on there. I can click it. You can see this was 7 people and I shared it with these other 2 people. All right, what's in the chat? So looks like Sarah took care of that. Other questions, other things you just want to know, or you have, maybe you're worried about how it will work in the field. Generally, what I do with checklists is because I bird a lot and I've birded for a long time. I don't really write down what I see in the field. I kind of just keep it in my head. And then at the end of the birding trip, I go through the checklist on mobile and I submit everything I've seen kind of from memory. But that's probably not the best way for most people. So you have multiple options. You could have like a notebook with you. You could write down the species you saw and the numbers, and then you could submit it on your mobile later. You could take that same piece of paper and log into your account on your computer, submit it on the computer. Or if you're using the mobile app, you can go every time you see a species, you can go and click it and it will record the species you've seen. The reason I don't do that is because, especially when I'm leading birding trips, a lot of stuff is happening at one time. And I don't want to be missing birds by being looking at my phone. But if you're just out for a casual stroll or you're sitting in your backyard and it's no pressure, keeping track kind of as you go is a really, really nice way to do it. Yes, Patricia, feel free to unmute.
I have a question about the numbers. Is it the number you see at that exact moment, or how accurate does or how important is the number?
So eBird wants you to submit a number of birds that you've seen throughout the whole checklist. So if you're walking on the beach and you see herring gulls, let's say, you see 3, you start to type in 3, then you walk down the beach and you see 7 more, then you should update that to 10. If you think some of the birds were the same birds as you saw before, then you should kind of make sure that you're not double counting birds. But the data are definitely estimates. The part about eBird that I didn't talk about at all yet really is that eBird has data reviewers who are experts in the field. These are ornithologists or avian ecologists who actually are assigned to each region. So we have at least one, I think 2 for Nantucket, who look through your checklists and make sure that your data are maybe not accurate, but are to be expected based on the time of year and the location you're at. And a lot of this that was being done by human effort in the past has been built into algorithms now. So for instance, if you report a bird on your checklist that's very rare in your location, it'll automatically give you a notification saying, basically, are you sure about that? Please provide proof. And if you submit a count of birds that's very high for your area, let's say I went out and I, submitted 75,000 herring gulls on Jetty's Beach, it's gonna say, are you sure? And then because it doesn't know if you just made a typing error or if you actually saw, kind of a rare large aggregation of birds. The thing you can do, which is not great, but it's accepted, is if you see a species of bird and you want to record it on your checklist, but you have no way of estimating the number, like something weird happened, they're just flying and you can't count, you can, instead of submitting a number, you can just submit the letter X, which means it was there, but I have no idea how many were there. I never do that. But also I, have worked in the birding realm a lot, and some of the jobs I've done were just like counting large amounts of birds. So I feel experienced at that. If you don't think you can do that, just put the X in instead. So Kathy Greeter in the chat, should I take a photo and then record it? So eBird does not require photos to be submitted. It doesn't require audio to be submitted, but it's great if you do have photos and audio. So if you're just like, you want to be a bird photographer or a wildlife photographer, and you already have those photos, when you go to upload your checklist, you would hit that add media button and you would add that photo, upload it, and then it's more of a verified report that bird was actually seen. You're only required to have photo or audio if it's a rare bird that you need kind of proof of. If it's just a common bird, they don't ask for it, but it's welcome and it's always accepted. We're getting a little bit past the time. I'm just going to share 2 more things before we wrap up, and then we can go back to questions if we need to. But I just want to let you know, I just want to let you know that this is only an hour workshop. There's so much more that we could talk about. If you want to know really more about eBird, the best place to start is on eBird Essentials. So the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, who has sponsored eBird and ran eBird, put together a free course for anybody with multiple training videos on all these topics that we've covered today. You can search eBird Essentials, or you can go to this link and you can take this free course that will kind of synthesize and build upon a lot more of the topics we've talked about.